Okay, welcome to the Baron Bond video livecast, where we talk about storytelling and filmmaking and science fiction. And this time we're going to talk about some science fiction, but this is science fiction that's happening now. And we're going to talk about AI. We're going to try to get our hands around, basically what it is and where it's going. And my guest tonight is a really smart guy, also a big science fiction fan, reads a lot, doesn't just watch. And I think he's as excited as I am about the possibilities of what's coming up. So there's no better person to have on this thing because he goes out on his own and researches stuff and just gains more and more knowledge. And he happens to be my older, wiser brother. So welcome, Aaron John Merkba.
Hola.
So I thought what we do first is just do. I put together with my limited research and even more limited understanding of AI. I put together a quick little presentation at the beginning, and we'll try to kind of get a baseline for what we're talking about, and then we'll get into like a specific or two about what we think where things might be headed. So okay, so and Aaron, you correct me if I've goofed anything up here in my understanding. So this is the wrong. Let's start at the beginning. All right, so just a general thing. How does it work? AI systems use massive amounts of data to develop algorithms. These algorithms recognize patterns and produce predictions. AI systems continue to learn and adapt to new data. And I don't know if I've worded this how AI systems are built. They're kind of the major disciplines of AI, as I understand it. And so I don't know that we need to get into details about each one of these, but the ones that I've seen are the machine learning, which is, right, I guess like the very basic of AI applications. It's just, right, massive amounts of data, and then it's able to sift through all that data. That's kind of like the core discipline of AI, or the core way things are built. And then the networks was like you were telling me. It's what is it? It's like finding it does more to categorize the information so it can prioritize certain aspects of the information. You said it works similar to how our brains work. Is that basically
That's in the ballpark.
Okay. Hey, that was at least a single, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then
Or a hit batter.
yeah, is there anything you wanted to add to that, like how the neural networks? It's kind of like a subset of machine learning, right?
Yeah, at this point, it's the backbone of AI. Neural networks are the backbone of AI. The
Like the way that they
it's sort of like the hardware / software backbone. And their base, this goes back all the way to the 1940s when
wow,
this idea first came up of these artificial neural networks based on the human brain.
yeah,
So just simple example, well, not so simple. The way we see things, you know, things come through our eyes, right? Get translated into signals down our neurons and get processed in several steps in our brain. And the kind of like basic idea of a neural network is very much like the way our brains work, very similar to the way our brains work. there are these critical points, roughly like synapses in the brain between neurons, where either a signal goes across the synapse or it doesn't, and that depends upon various inputs coming into like a central neuron or cluster of neurons, and then based on that sort of weighting factor, then something else goes onto another set of clusters. So like in AI neural networks, that sort of weighting is represented by actually like a numerical value, like a weighting of whether at that point we should, let's say, like in the like in an image, have we is this an edge or not? Various really primitive aspects like that, and then somehow through a large number of these points, things become constructed into a continual 3D image for us. And that's something similar happens with neural networks, which have been very successful the last 10 plus years in things like machine learning, deep learning based on deep neural networks. That is, neural networks with a huge number of layers. So the current frontier models in AI research, they have like billions of these critical weighting points, parameters. Assuming I'm not getting this incorrectly, I think the biggest model has 300 billion of these.
Yeah, and you were mentioning that the human brain has trillions of these
right
critical data points that determine how much further down the process you need to go.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how good an analogy that is, the trillion synapses versus the billions of weighting points in artificial neural networks.
Oh, it's not an exact.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a one-for-one relationship, but we'll get into this a little bit more about the kind of why there's been so much success recently. There was a lot of success in the 2010s with specific machine learning AIs that were tasked with very specific areas in which they could improve something or other, and we could go into examples, but now we've had these large language models that have a huge number of capabilities and keep accumulating them, and we'll get into maybe a bit about that.
Right. Yeah. That aspect of where they're to this day they're constantly, as they gather new data, coming up with more and more possible outcomes.
Yeah, it's actually a combination of things. I don't know if you want me to get into this right now, or you want to.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe let's go through this thing. So that the deep learning is, as I kind of understand, that's just, again, having more and more layers of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so-called deep neural networks with huge numbers of layers that something goes through
from just basic machine learning.
Yeah, and machine learning is also just sort of, I don't know. I think the term machine learning was mostly used in 10 years or so ago to refer to a neural network that was trained to like improve the efficiency of like
a specific task, right?
Yeah, I don't know, like if our viewers ever seen the series, the HBO series Silicon Valley.
No, no. Is it
Well,
good?
yeah, it is. It's pretty funny, and there's a lot of this kind of talk in there. It goes by pretty fast. It's funny. It's a comedy, and but in it, this core company that we follow through the series, uh, they actually use a neural network to try to improve the efficiency of their software package.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the sort of things that machine learning was doing like 10 years ago.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Okay, and just yeah, to go through these things that natural language processing, that's obviously like kind of dedicated to the human language, speech recognition, that kind of thing. It's kind of a specific subset of all the neural networks.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and I would say, am I still here? I guess.
Yeah.
You know, the current their speech is actually. Are we on?
Oh, yeah.
We
You
seem to
just
go
clicked
in
out
and
there
out.
for just a bit.
Okay, so speech is actually much more difficult to process. I just read this book by Steven Pinker, written in the 90s, called The Language Instinct. And he was talking even then about how freaking difficult it is to understand human speech. Different, people have slightly different tonality, different pitches, like all kinds of little subtle differences. And to this day, there are still problems. Like if you use like Siri or Google, and you ask it to do something, sometimes you have to enunciate very carefully for it to get what the fuck you're saying. I assume we can be a little salty here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
This ain't for kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but anyway, so it's easier for AIs to interpret text, but now they, of course, also consume images, audio, all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of got into this last distinction is the computer vision, and yeah, that has to do with mostly the visual aspects of things. I guess they take a bazillion images and break them down into pixels, and
Absolutely.
and then they figure out, okay, these color pixels would go together depending on what kind of image, yeah. So it's made available. Yeah, the advancements in the video creation are astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And you can imagine something similar with speech. Like
Yeah.
the computer is not getting the actual sound. It's somehow being translated into something it can then interpret. Right. Text for a long time in information technology has been, there's a coding system, more than one coding system that basically translates text into a code for computers to understand, like the individual letters.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
yeah, that just made me think of when I thought about yeah, because I think one of the things that may become very key in the future of how all this stuff works again is the voice recognition. When most people are talking to their computers and not typing,
right.
I think that's going to take everybody to kind of a different place, because then you'll have to vocalize things as carefully as you type in things, to be able to get an accurate or complete, response.
Right. And you can imagine how difficult that is. Like human speech, human conversations are filled with a lot of, that kind of thing. So good luck.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's the kind of thing that eventually could be conquered.
Right. Yeah. But that one in particular, as I was putting this thing together, I was thinking, and in general, science fiction in the 60s, right? You just take the original Star Trek, and the communicator, the smartphones have got that blown out of the water, right?
Right.
And the computer, where is, how far are we from epsilon 3, and right, like we already got that. The universal translator, we're like real close to having real time
No, yeah,
translation of different languages.
Absolutely. In fact, text-based language translation, again, was, I think, largely conquered in the last decade, the prior decade, the 2010s.
So
Yeah, that's one of the areas where like all this, get a large amount of data. Yeah, there's all these billions of documents where the same speech or whatever is given in different languages, and based on that, quite some time, 10 plus years ago, there, competent translators came into being. I'm not sure how perfect they are to this day, but still they were like, very good. And
Yeah.
if you do, like, if you ever use Google Translate, like you read something
On
in
occasion. Yeah. On
yeah,
occasion. It's usually like specific words, but
yeah, exactly. Whereas often phrases have sort of nuances
right.
in another language that are sometimes difficult to capture. But
Yeah, that's definitely come along. Okay, now I put this one in there to this term generative AI,
right,
and I kind of wanted to. It seemed important to kind of distinguish that, and I just described it as AI systems that can generate new content based on user prompts, not just predicting some set patterns, but it's reacting directly to a specific set of input.
right, and coming up with something, and I'm sure we've all seen it by this point. Yeah, they'll just come up with a poem.
Yeah.
Give me a haiku, or give me a sonnet. Just or give very very specific kinds of styles, and it'll just boom, here it is.
Yeah, and again, in the visual realm, you can get like unbelievably detailed as far as how you're describing something. You want a purple dragon with dirty scales in a forest at the top of a mountain, and it's cloudy, and
Right.
you can even describe the mood. The mood is scary, or it's bright, or right.
Right.
Yeah, this stuff is just amazing, and that's learning. That's using the large language models, right? Where it's just there's so much information at this point. There's so many models that have already been trained, and they keep piling one on top of the other to get more and more advanced, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the generative AI is kind of what most of it, I think a lot of people think of when they think of AI, and because that's the GPT, Google Gemini, Adobe Firefly. Synthesia is a supposedly pretty well used visual video AI, but generative AI. So the next thing that seemed important is to kind of what I've been able to understand, that there's like four main types of AI, if you will, and reactive machines is, again, I guess just the most basic. You put in this input and it delivers this, basically the same output. It's not
Where,
It's not learning
can
anything
can I
necessarily.
ask you where you came up with this list? I've never seen a list like this.
Yeah, I've seen it on a couple. I only like researched like a few different articles about AI that seemed to be fairly comprehensive, and they all had this list.
Really, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
So
Okay,
anyway, and that's my understanding of the reactive machines is again just a basic input output,
yeah,
limited memory.
fairly straightforward, right?
Huh?
Like a fairly straightforward,
Yeah. Like a real.
like not. It's not going to give you a sonnet. It's just going to say yes.
Yes, it's for
15.
boring automated repetitive tasks. The limited memory. That's what they called it in all three articles, and that's what everybody's using now. I don't know that that's a common term.
Yeah, I have a.
That's they referred to it as was limited memory, like it's. Yeah, I'm just putting down what.
Yeah, this is interesting. Were these articles perhaps talking about what's between us and AGI?
No, I was gonna. That was my next thing I was going to get into. The next two, they're in like theory of mind, is basically artificial general intelligence.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, for my understanding of how they're using this term, theory of mind, and again, they all used it. Is basically artificial general intelligence, and then of course self-awareness is something. So both we don't currently have artificial general intelligence yet, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Although, yeah, the speculation is that it. Some people think 3 years.
Wow.
Another group thinks like 5 to 10. Some people think 30. And it really depends upon whether we're currently in this like what appears to be an exponential growth phase and capability improvement. And we can talk about that in a sec, but it really depends upon how well that's going to pan out just by itself, or whether we're going to need to develop newer techniques to get further to get the real AGI, which is an AI that can pretty much act like a human.
Yeah.
Not so much, I don't know about theory of mind or self-awareness specifically, but somebody that, it's like a Turing machine, a Turing, like his, anybody that could fool a human being talking to this thing, interacting with this thing, would not be able to figure out whether or not it was a machine or not. It would seem like just another human being.
Yeah, the Turing test.
That ability to sort of, I guess I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting ahead. Anyway, theory of mind to me is much more specific. That's in, in psychology, theory of mind is where humans react to other humans, make decisions about what they're doing, assuming that they have a mind similar to my own, and therefore you can predict, like based on what are their likely motivations, what might they know or not know in a certain situation, and you can, like if somebody was out of the room when you hit something, they're not going to know where that thing you hit is. Like babies, relatively young humans know this stuff. They have a theory of mind. They just know that when you come back in the room, you're not going to know where so and so hid that, whatever, for example. So theory of mind is very much about like our just assumption that this other entity that we're dealing with has can only see, has certain perceptions and certain reasoning ability and certain motivations that we can use to reliably predict their behavior and what they're likely to know and not know, and therefore that would affect their behavior.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is interesting because, like, in terms of AGI, I have not seen this specific
Term.
theory of mind thrown out,
Yeah.
nor self-awareness.
Well, no. I mean, self-awareness. I mean, that to me, that's self-explanatory. That the machine reaches some level that nobody knows if it's ever going to happen, but it's aware of itself. So, is that now a new kind of consciousness? I mean, nobody knows, right?
Right. Yeah. The general feeling is that none of these AIs currently have real self.
Oh yeah. That's why it says, are these coming?
Yeah, again, like there's all these. I read another book I read a couple years ago. There were all these theories of consciousness. There's a whole bunch of them, and they're obviously kind of like nuanced. They're related to each other in various ways, but nobody knows. They're all speculative. There really is very little understanding to this day of what it takes to have consciousness. Does
right.
My cat?
Because we don't understand
Does your cat have consciousness?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
How can we develop something that emulates consciousness when we don't really understand how it works with ourselves?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to kind of wrap this up, there's just a couple more slides. The downsides of AI. Some of those are pretty obvious. Job displacement, biased training models, so you get biased outcomes. The issue of privacy, obviously the lack of currently the lack of transparency on who's building these models, what data sets are they using, et cetera, and then the energy cost, which I don't know that much about. I've just always heard tell that it just takes massive amounts of energy to run some of these programs. Yeah, I just don't know that much about it, but I've heard that several times that's part of the need for more and more energy production is basically based on AI being used throughout global society.
Okay. Well, okay. Yeah. So mostly that energy cost concern has to do with mostly to do with AI training. The current era we're in is the so-called scaling era. That's actually this book I skimmed through parts of. I haven't read yet by Dwarkesh Patel and I think it's Gavin Leach. Based on Patel has this podcast he does, and so he's had all these bigwigs in the AI arena come and talk to him, and he knows a lot about this stuff. He digs into it much more than me. He does an incredible amount of research, so God, I'm getting off track here. So the energy. So we're in this scaling era. His book is called The Scaling Era: An Oral History of 2019 to 2025.
Yeah. So let me say, are you saying that at a certain point, most of the training will kind of be done, and then the energy cost will reduce?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So here's what the scaling era means. It seems that all these dramatic improvements, especially like particularly through the end of last year, like Ezra Klein has he noticed that there was this dramatic, to him, there was a big improvement in the functionality of AIs just in the latter half of last year. There has been, there's the current largely held hypothesis is that all the improvements for quite some time, actually prior to 2019 even, has been with increasing the amount of data going into the AIs, increasing amount of compute, like some measure of the amount of compute time. There's, I don't know if you heard the term like flops, just some measure of the amount of actual computation going on within the machine on this training data. So you scale up the amount of data, the amount of flops, and oh God, now I'm forgetting the third part. Oh crap! How could I forget? I'm there's a third part to this.
Yeah,
those two are usually considered the most critical. And obviously to get all this compute, you need more and more energy. Like we got these increasingly sophisticated chips that are used. They're like GPUs, graphic processor units, kind of like are used in gaming, and even more complicated things called tensor processing units. If you know a little bit of physics, what that might refer to. But yeah. So anyway, it's taken a large amount of energy to do the training on these cutting edge models, and the scale of the energy that goes into them to allow the compute keeps going up. There is some thought that there might be ways to make that more efficient, and we'll see how that goes.
Well, it's kind of, that reminds me of what's the Chinese version that they had,
DeepSeek. Yeah, DeepSeek.
DeepSeek, where it's like prioritizing what it looks at so that it doesn't have to crunch through everything. It crunches through the information more efficiently, basically, right?
Okay. Well, yeah, here's the thing about DeepSeek. So OpenAI, I believe this came from OpenAI, I'm pretty sure, they claim they basically took their model with all their billions of parameters and they put a user interface in the front of it. Now, the user interface is extremely sophisticated. It can show you its chain of reasoning in DeepSeek. So it's very versatile. It didn't cost a whole lot to create it compared to GPT-4 or something like that. Much cheaper, a lot less training time to create this, what essentially is this front end engine that interacts between the human and the model to get it to give you information back.
Yeah.
Anyway, so.
Yeah. So okay, but so is there any thought about that things will reach a point where the energy cost doesn't just keep going up after they reach a certain level of scaling? Or does like nobody really knows?
Well, yeah, really in this field, they can see the trend lines now and they just extrapolate them. And those trend lines have been going on for a while now.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, part of the thing I skimmed in the Patel book was this notion that you're going to get like a gigawatt data center, and that's about the probably the extent you can get in an individual data center. And then you're going to need to develop methods to train models using multiple data centers to get around this sort of choke point with energy. But there's also the thought that, yeah, there's going to have to be something that makes the energy use much more efficient, makes the compute time more efficient. One of the thoughts is that we're going to get to where AIs are going to be able to start training themselves, and they're going to be able to develop algorithms how to do that more and more efficiently, and to continually improve, like the cutting edge model. So various AIs will get together and help to build this latest model. This is not happening currently, okay? But that's sort of the speculation on where this might go, and that's where you get this, to get around some of these bottlenecks.
Right.
What may be bottlenecks, but we'll see. Like I was telling you the other day, like the increase in functionality is doubling every 6 months.
Yeah.
Compared to like Moore's law, the original Moore's law was every 24 months. Now it's kind of like, well, maybe it's 18, but I mean, that's incredible. And so the scaling area that we're in, it seems like you get these emergent properties, things that they just couldn't do before, that all of a sudden they can do, right? And they just keep on scaling up, and boom, they're just getting these dramatic improvements in functionality, and they don't know where that ends. Is this an exponential curve, or is it going to plateau, and we're going to have to figure something else out? Nobody's entirely sure.
Right. Or could we hit a plateau and that would be fine for another century?
Yeah, I don't know about. It depends upon where we end up.
Yeah. Right? Yes. Yeah. How we use it.
But so, as far as the downsides too, like a lot of, I think more of the concern is what's generally called safety, or sometimes called lack of alignment of what the AI spits out versus what humans wanted them to spit out, the kinds of things humans want them to spit out. Like, do they have our values? We don't. I'm trying to think of a simple example.
Well, are you saying that that's a potential, like, beyond
downside? Yeah,
seriously. Yeah. But I mean,
is that you've heard of, like Jeffrey Hinton is claiming, like, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what they're going to want. To which I always ask, what the fuck does an AI want? We pretty much put into them what they want.
So you're saying that could develop independent of however they were trained. They might interpret the data a little bit differently than we would expect them to.
Right. Or they might say, okay, yeah, do this thing that's going to result in 100 people dying, but it'll have the beneficial effect of saving 1,000 lives over here in the long term.
Yeah. Okay.
That kind of thing. But also there, very much a big concern with what if some bad guy gets an AI and uses it to do some really dastardly thing.
Yeah. Of course. And that
that is a real concern.
Any technology.
How do you put in guardrails?
Prevent
the AI from doing something we don't really want it to do.
Nor
some bad guy being able to get it, that kind of thing.
It's just with any new technology, it's just like how social media is working now and that kind of thing.
Well,
there's always that potential.
There's a difference between, let's say, an atom bomb versus a fax machine in terms of technology.
Right?
There are some things that are more potentially dangerous. And we were talking the other day even about deepfakes. You're not as concerned with deepfakes. Because to you, they still seem fake, right? They look fake.
What? No. That was absolutely not my point. I mean, for me, I'm such a visual guy, so for me, but to me, it's a broader thing, that if somebody puts out a deep fake of somebody saying whatever, right, and then it's not going to be too much. It's not going to take too much to disprove that. Now, the damage could already be done to some degree. I understand that.
Yeah, or you get
that's why
a significant part of the population believing the deep fake.
Yeah, but
that kind of problem.
But Aaron, that happens now. That happened before deep fakes, right? All you got to do is put this information online, and there's going to be a certain percentage of people who, if it aligns with their worldview and whatnot, they're going to believe it. Whereas the average Joe would look at it and go, "That's the stupidest thing I ever heard." So I guess that's where I would distinguish why I'm not as worried about that particular aspect, because it just doesn't seem like anybody will ultimately be fooled any more than they are now.
Okay.
That's all. Okay, let's get through this so we can spend a little bit of time.
Sorry.
Specific. So obviously, right? I mean, the potential affects everything. Healthcare. We've talked about that. Transportation, energy, research and education, defense. That's a scary one.
Yeah.
And of course, politics.
Right.
So, I thought we might concentrate on one thing that I was telling you before, that I've really been interested in this idea of AI companions. It's been around, and it's basically it's out there to some degree now, in a way, but that could really advance. And I thought this idea of having AI mentors, I like that term, that would specifically be designed. I don't know if this is a bad idea or not, but specifically designed to try to, produce human beings that have some morals and integrity.
Sure.
And it has the potential to have a very positive impact. Obviously, the downsides are tremendous, and you don't want anybody, let alone kids growing up, to only be able to interact with their AI companion. Obviously, that would not be a good outcome. But I think if it was handled correctly and done in limited use, and again, it's always, where are the parameters, where's the safety, So I don't know. What's your thought about that? Are you thinking the disadvantages outweigh the advantages?
Well, no, I actually think it's an interesting idea, and to me, it's less creepy than Zuckerberg talking about AI friends.
Oh yeah,
there's all this loneliness out there, so I'm gonna help. Let's give them AI friends, like little imaginary friends. I don't know, that just seems, I don't know about that.
Yeah, and I was thinking a little bit more about it, and AI is just emulating stuff that's kind of already around, in a sense, because I mean, like an AI companion, for a lot of children, they've already had their artificial companions in the form of, Sesame Street, or whatever that you want. For us, Captain Kangaroo was kind of our artificial, right? Our artificial companion.
Well, artificial.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's sort of like friendly teacher.
Yeah.
Like Captain Kangaroo.
You trust what's going to come out of their mouth is you trust. So again, with the right precautions and safety and parameters, and regulation, of course, and oversight. That's a thing. I mean, this right. It starts to seem incredibly complicated and daunting to how are we going to oversee this stuff that's just whizzing by us, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you keep certain fanatical groups from creating a Nazi mentor, for example?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I actually think that's not. I think the mentor idea is not a bad idea. Actually, actually, that strikes me as like something that could be valuable. In general, like actually, I mean, besides like all the help with in technology, healthcare, uh, you know, potentially in basic research with AIs, and they're already being used too. By the way, AIs will make a suggestion, and then people will, like certain scientists, then go and test these possibilities out. That's already happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm also kind of like more interested myself in what can be done to make us human beings better at getting along with each other. Like can we create, like basically a healthier society? Like a free society. So we're not talking about suppressing anybody, but somehow a society that's better at getting along with each other, being able to communicate with each other in constructive ways, in useful ways. Not like we're going to get rid of all our differences of opinion, but that actually we can use those differences to maybe come up with better consensi
solutions.
better solutions. Is that a possibility? Can we make the economy work better for more people than currently seems to be the case? Can we help it, like figure out, like how can we what's a good idea about building more housing? People are actually thinking about that now. But is there a way to, like, right now there's a housing shortage in this country. Rents keep going up. As I'm well aware myself, it's hit me pretty bad. But things along the lines of practical things, very practical economic things, as well as kind of like more social things, and even political things, but it's somehow in a way that is neutral.
More equitable.
Yeah. Well, what I mean is not like that. Pretty much the vast majority of people can see as useful things to do, useful in coming up with a better way of making decisions in our society.
Right.
Better. So I just think that, boy, it's like you talk about science fiction movies, like, or books, like it does seem like we're still in our blankety blank adolescence, right? It's like, Christ, we're crazy at times. Too many of us are just crazy, and it's just like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean,
can we do it? Is this the best we can do? Come on, people.
Yeah,
really?
I mean, right? You've read the novels where the basic scenario is the AI is basically taking care of everybody else. I think of like John Varley in like Steel Beach or Golden Globes, where society has said, dude, you take over. You run all the basics. and we'll just go about and do what we do and try not to destroy everything in the
Can
process.
we
But
not
basically,
do something
handing it over to
a little
AI.
bit better, where people, are more engaged in what's going on and have useful input in making real changes that they find that seem beneficial to them? Is that possible? Yeah, I was also thinking of the Culture series. Actually, I
Yeah.
really love that series. I've read the whole thing. Our nephew has read it through all the books twice.
We talked about this a little bit. Yeah, to me, yeah, the whole I haven't read that many. I've only read like 4, and the one I just finished, I did not care for. So he's kind of hit or miss for me.
Okay,
I've only read 4 of the books.
Okay, which one did you not like?
Accession.
Oh yeah, that's a little bit more, I would say, abstract in a way. But he's also just showing that even machines can have antisocial behavior.
Yeah, which is nothing I didn't know. I don't know. It's to me, it was more about the quality of the writing.
I think especially as he goes on in the series, one of the trend lines is, people are kind of stupid, so the AIs have got to like do things for them, because otherwise they're going to fuck up, right? And we basically got to take care of these fucking babies. But actually, if you like, there's a concept of the minds, not just the drone, the minds that are these bigger, more and run a whole solar system or something.
Yeah, and
like they have stories, like a depth of sensibility about things. Like one actually decides to commit suicide based on what it had to do in its previous war, and decides to it's going to sacrifice itself. As sort of a statement.
In the Culture books, he's portraying the AIs as being self-aware.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So again, I might read more if you recommended specific.
Actually, another book
I really did like. I mean, that also made me think of the companion thing, because I love the way he portrays the AI, particularly in some of the books.
Not the one that genuinely
have their own personality.
Not the one that gives up on this guy and just fuck it, and he just starts cutting open his head and getting rid of this fucking memory that keeps this guy from, getting over it, So he just and makes jokes about it later, like gives him a hat because he has no head anymore or something weird like that. He has a weird sense of humor. Actually, if you're talking about science fiction, I actually like the Ancillary series. I don't know if you read any of those. Ancillary.
I read
Justice.
The first one.
Yeah, I read all 3. And it's kind of like, again, an artificial intelligence with a strong sense of, justice, but also a strong sense of right and wrong, right? And willing to go out on a limb to ensure good outcomes. I thought it was also interesting, like it could instantiate, it was a ship in the beginning, and then it instantiated itself like an individual member of the crew, right? But then it could become bigger, and then the evil emperor in the series, like kind of like divided itself because its empire was too big, and then it was like, well, I don't trust the other half of myself, and so they kind of went to war with each other.
Oh, are you? Yeah. I mean,
Sorry, maybe I'm giving you
I
a lot of
may
spoilers there.
read the other two books. So yeah, don't tell me, you know, too much about about what happens. But yeah, it's a strange thing. Sometimes I get a little not pulled out of a story, but just things I notice. I don't know. It's because I used to edit a lot of copy, and I spent years. I was always the head writer, but also the head proofreader of everything. So I got very used to, you know, picking out specific things, and I liked Ancillary Justice was the first one, right?
Right.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. But there were just certain things that niggled at me,
Oh,
and then
of
you
course.
didn't even record. I'm telling you, if you go back through it, there were two things, and one was her use of time as a descriptor. Like she did this thing in 31 seconds, and she utilized that like 4 or 5 times. In the course of a book, it's not a big deal, but for some reason, it just like, hey, she did it again. Hey, she did it again. It's like,
yeah,
hey,
the seams are showing, right?
yeah, well, I mean, you know, again, to me, I'm a little surprised that a good editor didn't point that out and go, hey, you might want to describe this a little bit differently. The other thing was her use of
You remember the publisher?
use of anger. She uses anger and angry over and over, and I right? You don't remember that, right?
I remember there were angry characters. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, the use of anger and angry was just like so repetitive. After a while, it's like, dude, you know.
Yeah.
But to me, that's not the writers. That's not the writer's fault. That's the editor's fault.
Well,
I mean,
do you remember the publisher?
huh?
I've read a couple things recently where I just thought, yeah, the editors didn't really like, you know, this needed better editing.
Yeah. Like, I think we talked about this before. Dan Simmons, he's written some fabulous book, but yeah, I think I think in his case he stopped listening to his editors. And he was successful enough to just say, no, I want that to be twice as long as it needs to be, because I just want to.
Although again, like I actually really like the whole what was it, the Hyperion Contos?
Yeah,
I think that was the whole series called. I actually really like that whole series. Myself.
I love the first book. The second book I liked quite a bit. The third book started to.
Did you read the fourth?
You know, I liked I liked a lot of aspects of it, but it just seemed like, yeah, he'd kind of go off into these things where he's just endlessly explaining, you know, this whatever's happening. I mean, just, you know, on and on and on. And, you know, I mean, I noticed that in some earlier books as well. It didn't bother me as much. So maybe it started to bother me a little more as I read more and more of his books. And then by that last one, the rise of Endymion, it was just like, yeah, I was just kind of like, right. Some parts of it became kind of a slog.
Okay.
But it did end. The ending was so good. The ending was so, I thought it was just so very well done. Wrapped things up in a way that didn't seem possible, you know.
Right.
So again, overall, I liked it, but seriously, those last two books in particular, there were times where it was a bit of a slog to get through for me.
Okay. I had less of a problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes, like, you know, especially with better writers, you know, you give them a little slack. you know,
Yeah, I don't. I'm not sure where I would categorize Simmons because again, I've read a lot of his other works. You know, the Olympus, the Ilium and Olympos, which I really enjoyed. But even back then, those were like one of the first couple of novels of his that I read, and I really liked the ideas and most of the writing. But it was like, man, this guy really goes on about stuff. He just goes on and on, you know. So, you know, I definitely liked him. And then Hyperion, like I said, I just loved it. So some of the best like individual stories that I've ever read. I mean, they were just like fantastic, you know, and all in one book, right? He could have put that out as an anthology and it would have been, you know, a hit, but he also managed to wrap this entire story around it. Yeah, it was just fantastic. But then, yeah, I
yeah,
read some of his older horror books, and wow, you know, kind of the same thing for me. So I don't know.
okay,
Maybe I got less tolerant for his the way he writes.
all right.
Yeah, I mean, is that the only thing that you've read by him, basically?
Yeah, I already read the Cantos. I didn't read anything else of his.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. Uh, you may want to just stop with that. So. No, I don't know. I think you might like the Ilium and Olympos pair of books. It's pretty outlandish stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, before we wrap up, since we're off of AI and talking science fiction books, which is not inappropriate, is there been anything that you've read recently that you thought was a real standout?
Well, science fiction or just in general?
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
That's
because
too bad because I actually like.
common ground here.
Okay, well, I'm going to sneak something in anyway.
Okay.
Uh, um, I read, there's a couple of books I've read recently that really impressed with
Nonfiction.
nonfiction. So I'll give a couple of those, and then I'll try to think of something in science fiction. In nonfiction, so last year, what's his name? Oh, God, forgot his first name. Oh, it's right
Well,
here.
no, I'm not going to recognize him anyway, right?
No,
what's the
actually,
subject?
I sent out a thing on one of his books before. Damon Acemoglu. He's a MIT economist. He won the Nobel Prize last year in economics. And I've been back, I recommended that book previously, Power and Progress, which is, I think, his latest book. Which I thought was very, very interesting, very good. But a book that actually I think ties more into his Nobel Prize was Why Nations Fail, which is a really good book on kind of like what works and doesn't in nations, and kind of like why they get in these traps where it doesn't work. And
Is this in a mostly economic aspect?
economics / history, and kind of like a theory of what works and what doesn't, kind of like high level. And to him, what works is basically, is basically societies where the economy is very inclusive, as opposed to, he says, extractive. There's a lot of societies where, like currently, like Russia's a good example, where there's an elite that's just sucking the rest of the country dry. And that's always been true. There's always been countries like that. And it's very hard to get out from under that. He goes through a large number of examples, and he talks about their history, kind of like, it's like there are these critical points where if they had just gone this way slightly differently, things might have been much different. And a lot of that is just about the power configuration at the time. But I thought it was a very interesting book. Like he talks about England, why England had the Industrial Revolution. It didn't come out of nowhere. English society had been changing. And I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure I'm going to lose a lot of people. But, you
lost me. I'm out of here, man.
Barry, you young whippersnapper. Anyway, I thought that was a really good book. It's written in 2012. Another really good book, also written quite some time ago, I read The Secret of Our Success, written by an anthropologist.
Oh, yeah, you were telling me about that one.
Yeah, I thought it was a really interesting read. It kind of like, kind of like the high level is people kind of just assume that we humans have been so successful on the planet because we're just smarter than all the other critters individually, right? We have all these big brains and we figure things out, blah, blah, blah. And he offers a lot of evidence why it's not exactly true. It's mostly because we developed cultures where, as a group, over generations, we managed to figure out how to live in these different areas of the planet. That, like, he goes through these cases with later European explorers coming into the same areas and freaking dying because they couldn't figure out how to live there. They couldn't take the advice of the people living there for one reason or another. They just didn't understand it. So bottom line is that humans developed this thing where eventually we developed these cumulative cultures where they sort of ratchet up and build on each other. And obviously, since the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution and whatnot, things have really sped up. So, when you look at somebody like Elon Musk, who thinks, I'm big cheese, I'm so good at this, so therefore I can come into government, I know what to do. It's just not like that. There's, we cut, like another book I've read actually by another psychologist, like how does your toilet work? Do you really know how your toilet works? Most people don't. It uses this weird vacuum effect to make it work. Most people don't have a clue, right? There's a lot of things like that in our lives. We know things essentially collectively culturally, we know all these things. Yeah.
So
but it's not like individually, we don't know them.
Yeah. That's kind of always been the case. And you're saying that projected forward, it makes more sense to come back to this idea that we need to work collectively to be able to be more successful.
Yeah, that we in fact do work collectively.
Yeah. The things
we build on each
things that work.
It's not like we're obviously we're our brains are 3.5 times the size of chimpanzees. But then you look at like AI, like how big it's getting and how potentially bigger it could get. It's going to, presumably would eventually leave us in the dust as far as like the hot shit of everything.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's probably going to be the case one way or another that we're going to have to figure out how to incorporate it into our societies and work with it usefully. And like I say, it would be awfully nice if we could stop being such assholes in general and get along with each other. Come on, It's
Yeah.
like
Well, that's
Rodney
yeah.
King. Can't we all get along?
Right. That's a whole other aspect in conversation. But yeah, that's a good way to end this. Maybe yeah, Aaron. Next time,
Oh, kind
if
about
you
science
want to
fiction.
be a guest on another one, I think that's a great topic. Is yeah, looking at the aspects that could actually make society work for everybody. Like really look at what could work, what is working, and you don't need to spend so much time on what isn't, and how to fix people as personalities, and just kind of look at a broader scope of how to make society work better for everyone. Because I mean, right? That's underneath the whole thing, right? It's like if every this is the one thing that I've never understood about some people who are in business in particular, that if everybody does better, they're going to make more money.
Right.
But I think the thing that it seems to be the thing that holds them back is that they won't be as special as everybody else, because I can't figure it out. I mean, right? It's simple. If everybody in society makes more money, they can sell more product. So, but then that gets into the whole thing. It's like, so it isn't really about accumulating more money and wealth and power, right? So, how do you solve that in society? Again, you just have to keep bringing up more human beings with a better moral compass, I guess.
Right, and we could discuss that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
all right, man. Cool. Well, thanks for being on, and yeah, I'll have you back if you're down.
Okay.
All
Sure.
right, man. Okay. See ya.
All right. Bye.